is been going on for decades. It's not something that happened out of the blue. Okay, this sleepiness, this mindset, like what? Islam is a religion of peace. Come on. Like they tried to paint everything as if it's like if you solved the Palestinian Israeli Palestinian conflict, as if the whole thing with the Arab world would suddenly go away, the Middle East will become a peaceful utopia, and the only problem is Israel. And after decades of perpetuating this message in so many different ways, and it all stems from like pure anti-Semitism, really, they have made the West believe that you can help these people. Instead of educating and telling them, hey, look what this culture is for what it is, no, they didn't. And why it's important? Because when Israel ended up having a very, Joe Biden was an asshole all of his life, right? I mean, I know he's not dead, but he's a brain dead. So I'm going to talk to him in past tense.
But I did feel like on October 6th, I did feel very nervous about our future here before October 7th. I felt very scared about where we're going with this intense tribalism. And it felt I didn't want to leave the house on a
This is
Saturday
what's
night.
scary when it comes to those protests, that people stop thinking. So then Israel tried to deal with the threat in a very in a way that made our ability to have the justification to fight Islam even less. One of them is, of course, the creation of the Iron Dome. The fact is that due to those technologies that Israel had developed, even after the crazy missile attack by Iran, Israel didn't have the ability to properly answer Iran. And not because Israel doesn't have the means, but because it was like the West was like, okay, we're gonna help you defend yourself, but that's it. You're not allowed to attack. And those things, and this is kind of a situation where if we didn't develop those crazy defense systems that cost a lot of money, then we wouldn't have this thing where like, oh, you can defend yourself, therefore you cannot attack. And it creates a time bomb. This is creating a time bomb. Another kind of behavior that became very permanent is that Israel is being forced to pass money to Hamas and the PA, Palestinian Authority. It's a combination of trying to bribe silence, just kind of protection money, and also a combination of if, for example, Israel didn't pass the money to the Palestinian authorities because they paid terrorists to conduct terrorist acts against Israel, then the Palestinian Authority would claim that Israel withholding money that belongs to them. Which, by the way, because there are terrorists, and it's all terrorist organizations, nobody in the world would even pass them money, because the people who pass the money can be sued. So how is this money passed? It's passed through the Israeli banks, where the Israeli government is giving the bank in Israel its guarantee that in case of that they're gonna get sued for passing money to terrorist organizations, then Israel would cover it up. Like this situation is caused because let's say that behind the scenes there is a lot of gunpoints from the outside that are direct. Another thing that the outside does is that they pay to every organization that goes against Israel. So all of the organizations that are like B'Tselem, that were caught, by the way, several times, fabricating data, fabricating stories, making up information. They had got tons of millions of money and millions of dollars from governments like from Germany, from Britain, from Canada, from the US, from all over. All those organizations get money from all those Western governments, even though they lie. They bring soldiers that by bribing them, and then they make up a story, and it's been caught already. It's been caught. They've been caught behind the scenes. They've been caught. There are recordings of soldiers like saying that when they don't know they're being recorded, that the what they're saying is not real, but they're getting paid for it. And that's not the only organization. Another organization is like that. Like B'Tselem is completely, and then there are and then what happened on October 7th that was different, right? Because everything I'm describing until now, that's like the basic everyday kind of situation that we've been living here with for decades now, just gotten worse and worse. What happened recently is that there was also more members that joined, that are the old Israeli elite that felt that their status is being put in danger, and that brought up, of course, the protests that you've been seeing and things like that. They made it even worse. So all those organizations that were profoundly anti-Israel were getting, by the way, same with like Haaretz. Who is reading Haaretz? A completely anti-Israel newspaper. Who is reading it? They are being quoted by Nazis all the time. Like it's not. It's 100% funded externally. It's not Israeli. And the thing is that a lot of things that, for example, that what the people do is they don't bring Israelis. They bring people who are completely outside of the Israeli mainstream opinion to represent Israel all the time, by the way, as well. Another thing that led to October 7th that was always there and wasn't special. Okay, so I'm gonna mark the year 2023 as special. There was something extra there that wasn't regular, but everything I'm saying now is it's been like that for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and it's only gotten worse. So another factor is that not only there was the fact that, okay, so we had the Iron Dome and the defense system during that time. So in a sense, that it's like it felt like you can deal with it, like you can tolerate it more. We had our hands tied by the West. Literally, there was nothing that could justify Israel taking real action against something like Hamas, which is not different than ISIS. And the third reason is because going to war is not so fun at all, right? So there wasn't motivation for it per se. It's not like we're like, okay, we should go. Like, no, every time we had an operation in Gaza, people were like, okay, let's finish it as fast as we can. And it wasn't like, let's go full in, right? So it wasn't like people were super motivated to get to the hellhole that is called Gaza and trying to fix it. It's like, we just left it. The Hamas took over several months later. We wanted to disengage, and we didn't want to deal with it anymore. And it's also like, it's this thing like if we have the Iron Dome also gave the Israelis a feeling that like they had more room to breathe, and like if they don't want to go to like, and took away from the Israelis as well the urgency to go to war and actually take care of the problem that was created. So that is also another. So that's a time bomb situation. We have a combination of a barbaric society, 100% dependent on the West, completely built on Islamic principles. Hamas took over. Israel didn't have the leeway from the West. Like if Israel had, Israel's experienced a lot of pressures from the West. By the way, a lot of the Israelis think the Israeli peace things that they did didn't come from a fair position in negotiation, right? Every time there was something when it comes to the Arabs, the Americans that were the brokers, they represented the Arab side. Every time, every single time, they made sure that Israel would lose, and they would basically they represented the Arab side, and they gave an empty promise to the Israelis that if something came to fruition, that they would be there. Empty promises. And of course there was the promise like you have from the Egyptians and from the Lebanese, and nothing that they promised, they were all 100% empty words. And one big reason that the Americans really didn't want Israel to go to Rafah, Rafah and Philadelphia is because they didn't want to the Israelis to uncover how much the Egyptians had been passing weapons, American weapons, to the Gazans that America knew about and Egypt knew about. And they tried to cover it up. They didn't want Israel to go there. They didn't want to uncover the fact that Egypt had been doing that, even though there was an American guarantee that Egypt would not go against Israel. So they broke the agreement. So they didn't want Israel, like this whole thing with Rafah, when the whole thing with like, oh no, there are so many refugees there and Israel's gonna, it's all a cover-up story. It was all a cover-up story so that Israel wouldn't be able to uncover the complete cooperation of the Egyptians and through the Egyptians, the Americans, with weaponizing the Gazans. They wanted to hide it, and they had been, in recent years, they've been giving so many weapons. Like the thing is, like the Israelis had to have those agreements also with a promise that they would have the strongest army around, like, right, that the Americans would prioritize the Israeli army so that Israel wouldn't be threatened, so that the Americans would be able to sell the Egyptians their weapons and make money out of it. And that came with the American guarantee that those weapons would not be used against Israel, and that Israel would be more technologically advanced. Things that they are trying to break all the time. So yeah, so this is why you think you see how they use the whole media, the whole world, like, oh, it's going to be so bad when Israel goes to Rafah. No, of course, military-wise, operation-wise, Israel done an amazing job in Rafah. Civilians didn't get hurt almost at all during Rafah. but the Americans had a lot to hide. And Israel also was in a dilemma when it happened, because the thing is, here's the other thing, that's because the Israelis and the Americans had such a long history of cooperating, a lot of the Israeli generals were educated at Harvard in the United States, which caused certain mental problems, which, do I need to explain, like how mentally ill you come out after studying at Harvard? So imagine our generals going to Harvard and coming out completely mentally ill. Like, I don't know if completely, but somewhat mentally ill, because that's what happens after you study in Harvard, apparently now. Eventually, it did come out because the soldiers on the ground leaked the information. They started, they took photos of the tunnels, and they sent it to the media, and the media. So, when the Hamas, when the weapons they had brought weapons that were Iranian, North Korean, Chinese, Russian, and American with them. Like, they had all those great variety of weaponry. So we had this time bomb creating, when the Egyptians were making, by the way, they make money out of it, of course, from this smuggling. They were smuggling to Gaza, therefore not keeping their promises with Israel. That is an American guarantee, and the Americans didn't want Israel to find the proof for that. So this is why they were so much against Rafah. Nothing else. Everything else was an excuse. There is another thing, is don't ever believe that they care about human life. They don't. They rarely do. Rarely do. All those media channels and everything, where's the outrage about what's happening in the Bangladesh? Like, how long was the they don't care. So yeah, we had a time bomb. So it was just a matter of time. It was just a matter of time, because then 2023 happened, and we have a very activist kind of justice system that had passed some awful, stupid. They are above the law. They think they're above democracy because they are just so much better than everyone else, and so forth and so on. So this criminal Aaron Barak passed a law that's called Ilat HaSbirut, which basically means that the judiciary system in Israel is a dictatorship, and the government wanted to change that. So that was an amazing opportunity for those foreign forces to start funding elements in the Israeli government and the Israeli jurisdictional system and the Israeli society and the media. And also there were people are like that just by themselves that were against the government. And it was a great opportunity, because B'Tselem was actually it was great to B'Tselem was great for outside demonization of Israel, right? Because they made up stories, they paid soldiers to go around and say that they did things that they didn't, right? That it was good money for them, It was every time, with B'Tselem, it was okay, if this soldier is saying what he did and it's true, why isn't this soldier not in jail? Shouldn't we go and put those soldiers in jail? And of course, when Israelis were listen, if the soldier did something like that, that goes against the Israeli law, we should judge them and put him in jail. And suddenly, apparently everything that they were claiming that they were doing was just a lie, right? But that didn't work inside of Israel. That didn't work inside of Israel. That only worked to demonize Israel outside, because of this notion, because of this kind of narrative building where it has nothing to do with Islam. It has everything to do with Israel being the bad guy. the Arabs are the victims. Islam is a religion of peace. Everybody who says anything else is wrong. Europe is not organized. Europe is not organized. Look at you, the United Kingdom right now. United Kingdom is not organized to deal with what's going on in the United Kingdom. It's a mess. The militaries of Europe are not there. They're not there. Europe is just completely disorganized. They're not ready for it. And like there is this whole thing that there is no trust in the system. There is no trust, and they're like, it's divided. But yeah, and now like they have to double down. All the elites have to double down with their, is like try to stop the war as much as possible, because obviously those lies are exploding in their faces. Because what did Tony Blair did in the Middle East except collecting money and getting like his future retirement getting taken care of? What was he doing? So yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so if you don't actually go and study history, then it makes sense. Like you have to understand like why there's this dissonance of like what is coming out of their mouth and the way they are supporting Israel to, just make sure it doesn't collapse. That's the minimum. Like that's what they're like. This is the fine line that they're walking, right? Like they don't want Israel to thrive. They don't care about Israel. They don't care about 1,000, 1,500 Israelis getting butchered in the most horrific way. They don't care about it. This is why they wanted to stop Israel from going to war. Like this is what there was a whole war behind the scenes. Because they don't care, right? This is like, okay, just deal with but there's like, okay, but Israel cannot deal with it. Same with Hezbollah now, right? Like, is there any pressure on Hamas and Hezbollah from the United States to stop being? No, they don't. There is none. On Iran, there is none. There is absolutely nothing. But they cannot. But they cannot let Israel collapse completely, because that would be collapse, because because they know that the Israel is like, this is barbarism of the worst kind. Because it's the same with Egyptians, by the way. The Egyptians, like things that happened on October 7th, there are refugees in Sudan that escaped to Egypt and that moved here, and they said, listen, the Egyptians did the same thing to the refugees from Sudan. The same things. And there are like, what, 80, 90, 100 million Egyptians? And the US is using Israel as an excuse to feed Jordan and to feed Egypt. It's an excuse. Because otherwise, how would you explain, like, why is America spoon-feeding those countries? And it's like, we're spoon-feeding those countries because if they collapse and they're definitely not independent, they cannot sustain themselves. Those barbarians are going to come to Europe and slaughter and rape everyone, every single one of them, the European people. So that's the reality. And Israel is a very comfortable excuse. Like, why support? Because Jordan helps us with our like friendship with Israel, and we love Israel because we're good Christians, when we believe that this is God's plan. And wow, this is the most comfortable excuse ever created by thank you God for writing, like, and passing down the Old Testament and the New Testament, because otherwise literally you couldn't not, like, you have this amazing balance where it's like, why do we? Because of Christianity, even though like the Jews are so horrible and terrible and like they are at fault with everything, we can like when we so we have to fuck them we cannot completely fuck them to annihilation, even though they deserve it, because of, it's against God. No, and then so we have to have this, we have this cooperation with Egypt and Jordan and everything like that. And it's not at all because that if we don't feed those countries, that, and if Israel ceases to exist, all those barbarians are gonna come to Europe and kill you and slaughter you. No, not at all because of that. And now the UK, even though, like, with those Asian men, right? It's like feeling just a gist of it, just a little bit of it. And they don't have the tools to deal with it. They don't. They're being gaslighted. They're being gaslighted. Like because the West had built this false narrative for decades now.